Games with unsatisfying endings.
Firewatch is one of my favorite video games of all time. Its end is horrible. The game takes place in Shoshone National Park in 1989 as a fire lookout. Back in the olden days, live satellite coverage to scan for fires didn't exist, so people would be hired to trek out to remote locations and scout for any potential fires, alone for months at a time. You play as a man named Henry, someone we learn a lot about far before we see the first lookout. While the majority of the game takes place in the national park, it actually opens with a story. In Boulder, Colorado, 1975, you meet a young woman at a bar. Her name is Julia, a college professor for evolutionary biology, and a week later you're a couple. Through the years, you two only fall further in love, drinking and admiring the views of the Colorado mountains as time slips further on. You get a dog and consider the idea of kids and decide to get engaged. Through every blip on this timeline, we see all the throes and follies of love, painting an entire charmed life before us, warts and all. These text scenes are intercut with hiking down a trail further and further into the woods. The idea of kids is eventually put aside for work, with Julia getting a job at Yale, but a year later she has an episode. Julia forgot that she lent books to another professor just 2 days earlier. Julia has early onset dementia.
Oh dang.
She's 41. Time slips on. 1987, her life is effectively falling apart. She could no longer keep her job. She drove to the next town over for no reason at all. You're given the choice a year later to send her off to a medical facility or take care of Julia yourself, but it all ends the same. If you try to take care of her on your own, you start drinking more and more often and get pulled over for a DUI. Julia's family takes her back to their home several states away. You see an ad in the paper for a job. You take it. Firewatch is a story about grief. It ends horribly. Once you arrive at the tower, the place you'll be spending the next several months of your life, you're greeted by Delilah. Communicating only through walkie-talkie, she runs a tower not too far from yours, one you can actually see in the distance. Throughout the game, you go around and do random things that Delilah assigns you, like dealing with illegal fireworks or picking up supply drops. But as time goes on, you discover that something suspicious is happening on the mountain. Borderlands 1 is a story about exactly one thing: the vault. It's been told in legends to be filled with loot that the mind can't even imagine, swaths of money and guns, and the entire game, and I mean the entire game, centers around the idea of opening it. Borderlands' main story takes around 7 hours if you ignore everything else in the game and just go straight for it, and all of the central story leads you to the final mission of the game. The setting is epic. In a cute little corner off the side of the salt flats, there's a cave that looks not man-made, but something made. It's built with cleanly cut, glowing stone blocks, and once you enter, you're teleported to the fallen ruins of a past civilization, a place called the Descent. You find the Guardians, a past race of beings that created the vault, something they intend to protect. You face some of the toughest and most coordinated enemies in the entire game, one specifically designed to ward off any and all invaders looking for treasure. What could possibly be in this vault? Dropping even further down, you enter the Iridian Promontory, the last line of defense between anyone in the Iridian's prized possession. This area is about as dramatic as possible, with sweeping wind and a wide open view of the desolation in front of you. How many years have passed? How long have these beings stood here? How are you one of the first to find it, to truly fight to the core of this great long-standing secret of the universe? Entering a war between the Crimson Lances and Guardians, you actually show up too late, with Captain Steele, the leader of the Crimson Lances, already assembling the key, but as the vault opens...
Yes, the key works! Sergeant, get your team ready to go inside.
The final boss of the game, the Destroyer, is a 15-minute long marathon, needing to deal with an onslaught of its minions and its gigantic health bar. It's a veritable nightmare of balancing everything Borderlands has to throw at you, with the ever-looming idea that if you do mess up and die, you need to start the entire thing over again. But this millennia-old creature is still mortal. With enough effort and firepower, even it can die.
Bro, I remember playing this game way back in the day. That fight took me forever to do. Oh my god, what he summed up is so true for Borderlands 1.
After all of the strife and build-up, you finally beat Borderlands. You finally, okay, you don't get to see the vault. Apparently, this destroyer monster was the vault or something, and your reward for beating the game is Lilith telling you that you did it and Tanis giving you reward money. Day 2 on the job starts showing off some weird things happening on the mountain.
Yeah.
A storm the day before presumably knocked out a power line to the station, and you need to trek out to see.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of the games he's using as examples, it's like, okay, there's all this build up, you reach the climax, you get to the very precipice of the thing, and then you're done. That's it, nothing else. You're done.
See where it happened to get it fixed. The game has a map system that lets you work your own way through the wilderness around you. It forces the player to become familiar with their surroundings and a lot of the interesting landmarks in your area. A place you travel through multiple times is this little cave with a locked gate called Cave 452. There's also the Medicine Wheel and Pork Pond and Thunder Canyon, all of these cute little landmarks that give character to your area. At this point, you and Delilah are pretty familiar with each other, talking about your lives before you both took the job, but in the middle of a conversation, this happens.
Hey, can you hold on a sec?
Sure. Just gonna keep hiking and hoping it warms up.
Heyo. I don't think so. Why, have you?
Oh, what?
Okay, good. No, I don't think he
Hey,
has
your
any
button
idea.
is still down.
I'm absolutely sure.
Delilah, I
Would
can
you?
hear you.
Oh,
Alright,
dang.
I'll let you know if anything changes in that regard.
I said I could... Wait, are you talking about me?
Hey, sorry about that.
If you press her
Oh,
about it, she
dang.
gets annoyed and walks away. Eventually, you do find the downed power cable, but there's a bit of a problem. It wasn't the storm. It was cut deliberately. You and Delilah assume it was the girls shooting off fireworks yesterday, but once you come across their campsite, it's abandoned. Along the way to the girls, you also find a backpack, one for a Brian Goodwin, the son of a former fire lookout, one that was positioned where you are now just 3 years ago, before mysteriously leaving. Things are getting interesting.
Ooh.
Old games are famous for bad endings, it's almost a tradition. By old I mean NES old, games with hardly any story to begin with, and somehow an even more disappointing end. With games getting their
Bro, I never beat any old game when I was a little kid, or even a teenager. Like all these like cabinet games, never beat any of them.
start in arcades, the end of a game was basically an afterthought. Every cabinet was specifically designed to make you lose as fast as possible, so the idea of putting effort into anything but the core game seemed silly. And when home consoles started to release, this philosophy didn't shift immediately. Not only did home games keep the unsatisfying endings of arcade games, they also kept their brutal difficulty. Kids, teenagers, and adults all around the world struggled night after night trying to beat these games. And for something so challenging, it's almost expected for it to have a reward at the end. Ghosts and Goblins, famous for being one of the hardest games at that time, being a port of an actual arcade game, also had one of the borderline funniest endings. There's technically only one ending, but in my opinion there's two. The gameplay of Ghosts and Goblins centers around platforming and combat, similar to that of Castlevania. Playing quickly and without mistakes, you're forced to fight through a 20-minute long obstacle course filled with precise jumps and enemies you can only ward off with a painfully limited set of attacks. The ending areas are packed with a constant stream of enemies popping up right in front of you, giving you absolutely no breathing room in an already stressful and difficult game, until you finally reach the final boss, Satan. Yeah, just like actually Satan. And I know this for sure because of the ending of the game, where once you finally vanquish him, this room is an illusion and is a trap devised by Satan. Go ahead, dauntlessly, make rapid progress. And then it just resets you to the start of the game.
Bro, that is so unsatisfying. Like, what? Oh my god. I'd be pissed. Like, that's all I get? A little paragraph? Good job. Pat on the back. Tap your head. Be like, okay, good job, man.
And you need to play the whole thing again. Jesus Christ. That ending, and apparently the entire world you just played in, was an illusion created by Satan, and so you need to play absolutely everything over again, an exact copy of the last game, while keeping the total lives you had remaining, giving you even less wiggle room than the first playthrough. Jesus Christ. And if you get to the end of the game again and beat Satan for real this time, no bullshit illusions, if you actually beat the game, congratulations. This story is happy end. Thank you.
What?
This might honestly be my favorite ending to a video game of all time.
That is so bad. Congratulations. Oh my god. Like, who made this?
As home consoles grew in popularity, game designers started to realize that people like games they can actually complete, and eventually more emphasis was placed on the entire game, including the ending. With newer technology and more experience, what was considered a good video game started to change as well. 3D and more complex sound design and voice acting led to creating immersive worlds for people to get lost in. More surreal and cinematic experiences came out after, feeling more like a playable movie than a video game. This intertwining of gameplay and narrative shifted to the point where sometimes the story meant more than the actual gameplay. These stories focused on rewarding the player, making it feel like this interactive journey was, in some way, worth it. I think some of the best examples of this are the Call of Duty games. You're placed in these massive conflicts.
Yeah, newsflash. There is actually a campaign to Call of Duty, or at least in most of the games. It's not just multiplayer in Warzone.
Centered around a figurehead, this big bad guy that makes you absolutely suffer over the course of the story. It's surprising how tragic a lot of missions are in Call of Duty games, and they do it for one very good reason: the final mission. For a classic Call of Duty campaign, it's all in the final mission. You've been given this irredeemable monster, this non-person to take out all of your suffering and anger on, and in that final mission, you finally get to. In a game focused entirely around mid to long distance gunplay, that curtain is thrown away completely as that final interaction is almost intimate.
Oh yeah, and the reason it's mid to long distance is because if you play on like veteran on any of these games, like, and you're up close, these guys are literally running at you with their gun in their left hand, sprinting. The gun is shaking up and down. They're like looking for you. They don't know where you're at because you're hiding behind like some wall, some car, some piece of cover. And the moment you stick your head out, they're just like, bop, dead. Or at least that's how it was whenever I played vet on a lot of the older COD games. That's why it's mid to long range, because you got no chance going up close with any of these guys.
All of the tactics and cover and positioning is out the window, as every important character shares this one combined moment of absolute chaos. You get to hear this untouchable scum scream in agony as his empire falls around him. It's the definition of rewarding the player. But not every Call of Duty does this.
Yeah.
The game I played most with my friends was Black Ops 2, a game set in the near future, a time of advanced and terrifying new technology. The story is close enough to our time to be treated like a regular Call of Duty game and not a Halo ripoff, and it all centers around this man named Raul Menendez, a somewhat eccentric and deeply psychotic leader of Cortes DA, a populist militant group active all around the world. He communicates to them through YouTube, like actually YouTube. This game also has a ship named after Barack Obama. And Raul wields power over a scary amount of people. You see the world from multiple perspectives and times, like flashbacks to the 1980s with Alex Mason or in 2025 with his son David. We find out that Menendez is trying to cause a war between the United States and China, and plans to stage a drone attack on several US cities, all at the same time on June 19th, the day the slaves were freed in the US. Anyways, like you expect, Menendez causes massive chaos and suffering, and you lose a crazy amount of your friends and allies, even for a Call of Duty game, until you finally get him in your grasp. After the building you were searching for Menendez in explodes, you use a pistol and a knife to kill off his lackeys and rush him down. But this game gives the player a choice at multiple points before now and presents you with one final one. Do you kill Menendez or not? Interestingly, killing Raul is the bad ending. As it turns out, he had a video scheduled if he was killed, asking all of his followers to rise up and start a revolution, and
Bro, I think I think I did kill him. I did multiple playthroughs, but the first time I did kill that dude.
The world is thrown into absolute chaos and anarchy. If you spare him, he's thrown in prison and his cyber attack is caught and fails. His movement dies out and he's trapped, miserable for the rest of his life. But do you want to know something interesting? Killing Menendez is the canon ending. It had to have been. There's nothing more natural to Call of Duty than pulling the trigger.
What? How does Call of Duty have things that are canon and not canon if you have things like, you know, choice in there? I had no idea that this was actually a thing. Like, that's not the canon ending. That's just the one that you picked. The actual true ending is this one.
The unsatisfying ending is not the one where the world falls into chaos. It's the one where you don't get to be the person that kills the bad guy. And it's all because these worlds aren't real. Who cares if this hypothetical Earth is destroyed? I want to see this monster dead, and so does everyone else.
Yeah.
This gratification above all else fills modern game writing, and it's prevalent because it is satisfying. We want those 5 or 10 or 30 or 200 hours you spend on a game to be worth it in some way. But even among the biggest video games of all,
I mean, it ultimately never is, you know? As long as you feel that you had fun playing the game, it's not really time wasted. But, you know, it is what it is.
time, there are some stories that break away from this pattern. The Last of Us was given a choice after their first widely successful game of where to take the story next. The first game was famous almost entirely for its narrative and world, and the relationship between Ellie and Joel. Faced with two paths, Naughty Dog took the one less traveled. Whatever your opinion is on The Last of Us 2's narrative, whether it's good art or not, the one thing I think everyone can agree on is that it's unsatisfying, and intentionally so. There's a feeling of deep emptiness in the story, like there's someone missing, and it's because someone is. Joel gets murdered near the very beginning of the story, one entire half of The Last of Us 1's success, and we're left with a dual plot. One of revenge and one of the seeming villains who killed him. The game attempts to humanize the killers, truly exploring the idea of the world and morals of all of this being gray. It's realistic as video games get, at least. As I said, the game is a revenge plot, in some way what Call of Duty games are, but unlike them, it doesn't even give you the option to kill Abby at the end. Because, ultimately, doing that is giving in to its video gaminess. Even if the ending wasn't canon and the world was set on fire and a meteor struck the earth and they all burned in hell, it wouldn't matter so long as the player just gets to see it. And so, the ending is unsatisfying, deeply so. Even in what is, in a sense, a good ending, Joel is just gone now. Any resolution feels empty without him. The plot to Firewatch takes a sharp turn into the world of conspiracy, as something in the forest is clearly out for you and Delilah. The game jumps forward in time, showing brief moments between you and your new friend and interesting happenings around Shoshone, but we eventually end up 2.5 months into the job. The entire rest of the game takes place in 4 long days, with you and Delilah being intimately familiar with each other by now. Any suspicion Henry had for her is gone, spending every day and night talking to someone who seemingly reminds him of his wife. One day, you head down to the lake to go fishing as you find a clipboard on a rock. Apparently, someone has been writing transcripts of your conversations with Delilah, at least until the last couple weeks. Mid-freakout, Henry hears a strange sound nearby and decides to investigate, finding a radio on the ground.
You didn't find and eat any mushrooms, did you? I mean, they can be fun, but also, you know, devastating.
Oh my god.
You wake up with the notepad and radio gone. Though the evidence is missing, we see a drawing of something called Wapiti Station, and after searching Wapiti Meadow to find it, we see a fenced-off section of forest. After finding it locked, you go searching for a way to open it, eventually leading you all the way to an old camp where you find an axe and start heading back towards Wapiti.
Are you there? I had a thought.
Let's hear it.
You heard someone in the bushes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume we're being tailed. Or you are, at least. Where are you right now?
Just on my way back, in and out of trees in the middle of nowhere.
Do you see anybody?
No, definitely not.
All right, so tell me what you think of this. Did you just cough?
No. Did you just cough?
No.
Oh, fuck.
Fuck. Get in your tower, shut the door. Don't leave, and don't use your radio. I'll call you. Understand? I will call you.
The next day,
Oh,
day
dang.
77, starts with Delilah clumsily signaling you to head down to Cottonwood Creek. There, you find a hopefully secure walkie-talkie she laid out for you, and the quest to break into the site is back on. Once you break into Wapiti Station, you find industrial communications equipment, tents filled with technology and a full plot of land. This site is clearly a government-sanctioned one, yet in the tents we find a map tracking Henry's movements and a file entirely dedicated to him and Delilah. Assessments about both of them and daily activities, obsessive data tracking and research for the both of them. Obviously scared shitless, you hightail it out of Wapiti Station, stealing a device called a wave receiver. But minutes after you leave, it's on fire. Returning to the tower, the receiver you stole starts beeping. You follow it to a backpack, one someone set up for you, and one that has a set of keys to a cave. Cave 452. Once you get back to the lookout, you find a Walkman taped to your door. Day 78. Someone claiming to be Henry called into a different lookout, saying that Delilah knew who started the fire. With no other leads but the key, you head down to the cave, the one you saw on the very first day of the job. After you're inside, you hear the door slam behind you. You're cut off from Delilah due to being underground, so all you have to do is move forward and see what you find. Luckily, you manage to find another way out, and on the way back you find Brian Goodwin's hideout, still preserved a few years later. It has a note, one saying that Brian stole his dad's climbing equipment to avoid needing to climb, among other things. Going through all of his memorabilia, you find a diagram for an HM radio, one he worked on with his father. Are you starting to catch on? Right before the ending, we get the seed of what is a much more realistic sounding answer, but the possibility of it being something more keeps us in denial. You decide to go back to the cave and go deeper inside, suspecting that the answer was sitting there the whole time. And it is. The old rotten corpse of Brian Goodwin, dead from a climbing incident.
What?
Day 79 is your last day as a lookout. The two fires that were being allowed to burn just a few days earlier turned into a combined inferno, letting the problem spread until it was too much to bear. However, despite the fire raging around you, the investigation is not done yet. The wave receiver is beeping again, and as you follow it, the evacuation plan is laid out. A helicopter will pick up both of you at Delilah's lookout, a chance to finally meet the person we've come to know. What's waiting at the end of the wave receiver signal is a cassette tape addressed to Henry.
Yeah, hi, Henry. Hey, you better find this before it burns up. I've been up here for 3 years. I kept it cozy. Winters are harsh as hell, and I ran out of books. But I got that antenna rigged up, and Delilah, she's a record you don't gotta flip. I kinda get why Brian took to her. About a week ago, I stopped worrying about you finding anything out, and that's right when everything went shithouse with you two. You guys don't know anything about having kids. All right, nobody knows nothing. It ain't Andy and Opie walking down the lake to fish every afternoon. It ain't Mayberry. But you gotta know I didn't kill him. All right, we were climbing. I was teaching him. Brian was uneducated in the way to do anything. He just fucking didn't sink his anchor the right way. You know, I thought about going back, having to answer questions, and having to get him put in the ground, and I didn't see the point. Don't come looking for me. Sorry about your wife.
You find the hideout that Ned used to surveil the two of you. Everything is explained. The researchers were on break from the government site. Ned was just borrowing it. The girls were discovered a day earlier in jail from hijacking a tractor. All of this, everything weird on the mountain, came from a paranoid veteran with PTSD who lost his son 3 years ago in a climbing accident. All that's left now is to head to the evacuation site. The mystery of the game, the entire driving force is gone, burned up, no longer needed or wanted. Once that's gone, there's no reason to be here anymore. Delilah, nervous about the fire, takes a helicopter that landed before you get there yourself. You don't even get to meet her. You walk alone to the end, the heart and soul of the game being gone now too. You can explore her lookout, some empty prize for everything you went through, and you get one final conversation with Delilah. The police have questions, the helicopter arrives, and life moves on. Firewatch has no final words to say, the conversation with Delilah being the last words spoken. You get on the helicopter and the world cuts to black.
Oh,
This
dang.
sucks, right? Even when a game is intentionally unsatisfying, what Firewatch is, it really, really sucks. I wanted to meet Delilah. I wanted there to be more to this mountain, for there to be something, anything, but it's just one man. Firewatch is not a story about a conspiracy, it's a story about grief. A man coping with the death of his son, a husband coping with the loss of his wife. The mountain is this place separated from reality, a getaway for the people who can't stand the world, but it's all burned away now. Once Henry gets off of that helicopter, he'll soon have to head back to the real world, the one where his wife has dementia and where time keeps slipping forward regardless of that fact. There was nothing on that mountain that could possibly satisfy the hole left inside of him. No answer to his suffering, nothing gained and everything lost. That's what grief is.
Dang.
For games like this, you can try to make some better end to the story in your head, but knowing the real ending always makes nicer ones feel childish almost.
Yeah.
And that's because, a lot of the time, those endings are childish. They're wish fulfillment, the perfect stories to make you feel good. Firewatch says that this is not a fake world, one for your entertainment, this is a real one. A world where the government doesn't spend their time spying on two random fire lookouts. A world where most people act out of pain rather than out of malice. Firewatch is our world. I've thought a lot about why these stories exist, what compels people to make them, and why I find myself drawn to them, but if I can be honest, I don't think I have an answer. I don't know what you gain from Firewatch. No narrative is given a payoff, no satisfaction is given to you. It is a mess of tragedy and suffering. But without a doubt, it still leaves you with something strong. Rather than filling that hole inside of you, just briefly, it gives you something stronger. A cold, black void. And, in my opinion, that is art too.
Yeah.
Thank you, and have a nice day.
Dang.
Welcome to the end card. By the way, I know I said at the beginning that the end of Firewatch was horrible, but that's just to set up the video's expectations. I think the ending fits the game well and made it far more memorable than any actual conspiracy happening. I also like The Last of Us Part 2, and if you're someone who thinks wokeness is killing the game industry, please don't subscribe to my channel. But if you're not one of those people and enjoyed the video and want to see more of my stuff in the future, please do subscribe to this channel. And if you want to support me even further, I have a Patreon that pays out only when I release a video. For just $2 a video, you get a direct line to me and other patrons, a role in my Discord server, any extra content I release, your name at the end of videos, and even a number of goals that I need to fulfill if they're met. And finally, shout out to my higher tier donors. Jerichode, Mendel, Automatic Quail, Choimu, Congruent Crib, Edmund Dong, Great...
Yeah, so I really liked this video, and I didn't really pay any mind to like whether or not a game had like a satisfying ending or not. Using Firewatch as like an example is really good because that's how the game was designed. It was designed to have an intentional, unsatisfying ending. And I don't know. I just think that was a good video. And I don't know. I think I could be more mindful about things like that if I ever play like any single player games like that in the future, which is really cool. Yeah, I still want to see more, man. Definitely. That was an awesome video. Freaking great job. It's like I couldn't really comment on anything because it was like you just like stating facts or whatever. But mean, I don't really have much else to say besides good job, man. Later.